Welcome to the Idea Climbing Podcast. Making money is all about mindset. Your beliefs about yourself and the world around you make or break you in the money game of life. I discuss strategies to create a successful money mindset in this episode with my guest, Chris Jarvis. Chris is the founder of Be the Giraffe and Giraffe Money, movements focused on helping families build wealth, character, and legacy across generations. He's an entrepreneur, investor, leadership coach, and lifelong adventurer who believes climbing and business both reveal who we really are under pressure. Through his work, he helps people lead with purpose, think long term, and build lives worth passing on. We dive into topics including how to embrace and start to build a successful money mindset at any age, the importance of finding mentors and other role models to give you advice on how to find them, how to discover a deeper purpose in life, the one thing above all else that you must do to create a successful money mindset, and more golden nuggets of advice. You're going to love this show. Chris, thank you for making the time to do the Idea Climbing Podcast. I appreciate you.
Mark, I'm so glad to be on. It should be a whole lot of fun.
It's going to be, and we got a lot to talk about around how to have a successful money mindset, create your own roadmap. But before you get into tips, tricks, strategies, things like that, when it comes to the money mindset, man, what's your story? Where did it come from for you?
Well, it started by having none of it. So like a lot of people, it was wanting what you couldn't have. So I grew up, parents divorced, and, mom did the whole go to school and work and food stamps. And, you look forward to groceries on a Saturday. You were awfully hungry on Thursday or Friday when they weren't there. And so I was like, yeah, I don't want this. So part of me was, yeah, I just don't want to, I don't want to be broke. So worked hard, got a sales job when I was in high school, started selling Cutco knives, and realized that I could get paid for performance instead of getting paid by the hour, where you would just look at your watch and, how much time? Okay, I just made a nickel. I just made a nickel. I just made a nickel. And this was, if I can sell, I can make money. That was great. I became an actuary out of college when nobody had jobs in the early 90s. The more exams I passed, the more promotions I got. So I did that. And, then I was like, okay, I don't want to be an insurance executive. I burned all the boats, went back to business school and went to a top 10 business school, and I'd gone to a state university. So these guys came from jobs I didn't even know existed. And I started meeting people who made outrageous amounts of money, realized I was an entrepreneur, and just fell in love with the do it yourself, figure it out, innovate. I want to say it was a bug because I would think I was always an entrepreneur deep down, but I just became enamored with building and creating and doing new things, and ultimately became the financial advisor to a lot of really rich people. I wrote 19 books and thousands of presentations, and all overcompensation stuff because I was young. So I had to, prove to people that I was smarter than they might have thought I was. And, you just keep solving problems. And then I realized that if you solve a problem for somebody, if you solve a $10 problem, you can get paid a couple bucks. If you sell $100,000 problem, you can get paid thousands of bucks. And that didn't, I am a mathematician. I did major in math. So, but the math isn't difficult to just say the bigger problems you solve, the more you can get paid. And so I started solving bigger and bigger problems and getting around people with more and more money.
When did you become consciously aware that you had a money mindset? Maybe it's always, maybe it was sometime when you were a kid, but when you actually became aware of what we're going to be talking about, okay, there is this thing, a mindset around money. When were you consciously aware of it to the point where you could start working on it?
I probably didn't realize it was something until I was in my 40s. Early 40s, I had been successful. I had consistently made $500,000 to $750,000 a year in my 30s. And then I got divorced, lost everything, and then got kicked out of a company I started when I had no money to defend myself. And I was like, oh. So I had a lot of oh shit moments, and really questioned who I was, and, a lot of therapy, and then found this whole coaching world and started talking to people, and people like, oh, you have a money blockage. It was all these things, stories you tell yourself about, stories you tell yourself. And that's when I started learning about coaching and visualization. And, so I'd say early to mid 40s. I'm 55. So, it was late. I mean, it wasn't like I stumbled on some great knowledge when I was 25. And I mean, I was grinding it out like everybody else, and I would say I was successful in spite of myself.
To inspire people to want to reach it before their 40s, I didn't expect that answer either. Whether it's something you would go back and tell yourself or I'll say advice you would have for a younger generation, what kind of aha moment or advice could you offer that might make someone watching or listening go, huh, there's this thing called money mindset. What would you say to people who are younger? Or is it something that you don't develop until your 40s? Or is there a nudge you could give some people like in their 20s and 30s?
I think the 40s was the self-awareness. I just had my head down grinding away, and I think people now are a little more aware. I think, obviously there's information. Like, I mean, we're old. I mean, I'm older than you, but like we're old compared to some of the people you're talking about. Like, so much of the information is out there now, so you can get access to gurus. A lot of them are, full of it, but there are a lot of really good people out there giving good advice. So, I mean, the idea that you have a money mindset, I built the Wild Factor, which is an assessment we'll give all your listeners for free. And it helps people figure out, you can find out if you're an eagle, elephant, monkey, dolphin, penguin. What it essentially does is you get to self-assess in about 5 minutes your own life, and it will grade you on your health, your career, your finances, your relationships, and your fun. It will tell you what your dominant animal is. It will tell you where your shortcomings are. And it'll give you a 19-page report on how you can leverage your natural abilities to improve your life across all aspects, but specifically over your low one. So it's just there's so many cool assessments now. There's the purpose factor. There's just lots of things that we didn't have available to us because we didn't have this thing called the internet. So,
Yeah.
There's just to have some idea of how the way you were brought up affects the way that you make decisions or the way that you see the world. I think that's fantastic that so much stuff is out there and there's so much free stuff, even if some of it is clickbait. I think it's never bad to invest in yourself. Like, that is the single greatest investment you can make. So I'd say that advice to young people is invest in yourself and understand yourself and realize that your brain is a super, super powerful thing. Again, we didn't have that. I had a little bit of it. Well, we'll get into maybe why later, but that'd be my advice on that is dive into understanding yourself and invest in yourself, because that's like, you're the only person responsible for your success. So take that time to understand yourself and appreciate that we've all got our own abilities and superpowers and shortcomings and, other things.
Well, let's dive into yourself. You mentioned growing up, and I can relate to that, the welfare cheese, things like that. Dig in a little bit. How did that affect you as an adult? What kind of things, how did that show up in your 20s, 30s, 40s growing up like that?
Yeah, not well. I wouldn't say. People say, how'd you handle that? It's like, yeah, not well at all. I went through my parents got divorced. I was the oldest kid, caretaker, problem solver, pleaser mentality. The two people in the world who would die for me wouldn't be in the same room. So I developed a natural desire to try to connect people. So, fast forward 30 years after the divorce, I realized that the thing that hurt me the most is the greatest strength I have, and that my ability to connect people and to see people and see how to connect them, whether it's a person, a company to an investor, a young person to a job that fits, an entrepreneur to the right advisor, somebody with money to a passion or a purpose that's going to drive them and fulfill them when they're kind of out on the ledge, pretty miserable, whatever it is. I love the connection. I love connecting people. So that was super cool. Again, 30 years of struggling with that before I realized it was a wonderful gift, that if I didn't suffer for that, I wouldn't have had it. But, I watched my mother, who was always so giving, despite the fact she didn't have anything. That was lovely. My dad had been a professional baseball player. So from him, I got you can do anything, but they didn't make any money back then. So like, all the baseball players had jobs in the off season. They would sell insurance, or they would do sales and promotion, or they work at a sporting goods store, or they'd cut lawns or shovel snow, or like, nobody made any money except for the top, what I think his signing bonus was $10,000 in 1965.
Hmm.
Again, like even inflation adjusted, the numbers were low. So I think just not having the money part was like, okay, you just got to work hard. So you don't, I'd say that not having stuff meant I didn't take anything for granted, which is, something I don't think my kids are going to, that's the struggle of how do you appreciate your own success without, and give your kids the same opportunity. And it's like, my kids are great in a lot of different ways, but it's not, they don't have grit from struggling. I can tell you that.
Yeah. So how do you, once you realize at any age you have a money mindset, let's call that the starting line. When you're off and running, how do you start to build it? And how do you, better question, how do you embrace and start to build it at any age? Once you realize there's this thing called the money mindset, I can work with it. Where do you go from there?
Yeah. So what I wrote a book called Be the Giraffe recently. It's the best. It's the best of the 19 books I've written. 14 stories about giraffes, and then how do you apply that to your personal life? How do you apply it to business? The most important two chapters. Chapter one, get out of the weeds. A giraffe eats from trees, so it can see what's going on around it. Every other vegetation eating animal is eating grass, and they literally have their head in the weeds. And when they lift it up, all they can see is the ass in front of them. But they can't really, they don't have much vision. They're just doing and not paying attention. The giraffe can eat from trees and survey what's going on, so it's aware. So it's constantly surveying, learning, seeing, not lost in the doing. And I think there's a lot of people lost in the doing, like they're doing things because they're expected to do that. And the second chapter of the book is Avoid the Masses and the Asses, which is people they want to fit in so badly. When I did the TED Talk, which is Surviving Ain't Thriving, 4.5 million views or something last I saw. This idea people are so afraid of making mistakes and not fitting in that they don't do anything interesting, or they don't do anything. Like so afraid of cancel culture, and they won't say anything. And I'm not saying you have to say insensitive things to be successful, but if you want to be successful, you're going to have to do things other people aren't willing to do, whether it's working hard or taking the job or traveling or going back to school and taking out loans or doing something else. And so I think the problem is people get so caught up by the group around them that if you want to be successful, you've got to find people to model. And, we're preaching to the converted, because anybody who's listening to this podcast is already investing time in trying to climb up some ladder in their life. Otherwise they wouldn't be investing this time. They wouldn't know you. They wouldn't already be subscribing to your podcast. So like, again, it's preaching to the converted, but for anybody who's listening to this for the first time, it's, you got to find mentors or people who are giving advice who've been there before, who are trying to inspire you and help you. And I think there's a lot of young men, I mean, women too, but certainly a lot of young men who just don't have a lot of role models and don't have a lot of people to look up to for advice. And you and I have talked about that's an important thing to us. And you got to find somebody who's willing to give you advice, somebody that there's different voices and different people with different stories. Find somebody that you can trust, or think you can trust, at least to start, and learn from people who've been there, because that's where you're going to get good advice from people who've been somewhere, can teach you how to get there. It's just, I don't know, go back to the 1400s. Somebody who sailed across the Atlantic, who's already got to the New World, is going to be a better person to give you advice than somebody who's been sitting at the dockyard in Spain telling you what it might be like. Like, you want somebody who's actually lived a little bit to give you advice. So stop asking the people around you what they want, because what they're going to tell you is all the things that are going to keep you right where you are. You've got to find advice from people who have actually done some things. Like, I think that's the thing about the mindset. You got to ask people for advice. And so finding mentors and people to listen to and people to work with who've been there, that's the single best advice to the young people, is you got to get out of your circle and find some people to talk to, work for, donate time to, any of it.
Well, once you find the people and you have some kind of direction, I think an important thing that we spoke about before I hit record, you got to know why you want the money to have any kind of roadmap to get the money. Could you speak to that? Why is it so important to know why you want the money and not that, oh, I want money?
Yeah, it's funny. I just had this conversation with a young guy who said, yeah, I appreciate this whole purpose. I was teaching a class at NYU, and He said, I appreciate the advice, but you already have money. And like, I'm going to just try to make it anyway. I said, yeah, you'll make it. And I'm not telling people not that money doesn't matter, because it does. It's at the end of the day to realize that money is a tool, and money is a tool that should give you some joy, some freedom, and eventually create some impact and legacy, which if you're 25 or 30, I know you're not thinking about legacy, and you really shouldn't. You should live your life. But if you have a reason for the money, a bunch of things will happen. You, you'll have some direction, and that's a good thing, right? If there's something pulling you there, just to have more money in and of itself is not a motivator. It doesn't affect the amygdala. It doesn't have any connection to the lizard brain. If you showed somebody from who you pulled out of the jungle $1 bill, they wouldn't have any feeling about it. We've developed feelings about money because of how we grew up. So money's just a thing that we created so that bartering would be more efficient. And you take your goods or services and you trade them for money, and then you use the money for the other goods or services that you need to live. But somewhere along the line we got lost, and it all became about how much money we have. But if you just have the money, when Morgan Housel wrote books right here, Psychology of Money, he says the trap is more. If you ask people how much is enough, unfortunately, for somebody with 10,000, 10 million, 10 billion, how much is enough? The answer is always more. Mm-hmm. And the problem with more is you just keep working and you never find any joy from it. And for longstanding wealth, if you want to train your body, if you're thinking about a really good thing, even back to Pavlov's dog, you feed the dog, you ring the bell, the mouth waters, you get to the point where you can just ring the bell and the mouth waters because they get used to it. Work and make money and then do something enjoyable, whether it's going on a trip or having a great experience or giving it to charity or buying nice things if that's what you like. Like, there is something to be said for the money leading to some deep emotional and fulfilling experience, whatever that looks like for you. And it's different for different people. So I like to help people. So having the freedom to be able to, whether it's make donations or invest in somebody's company or, alleviate some pain they might have, like that brings me some joy. So the whole why you're doing it, for the younger people, it's make sure you're doing some positive reinforcement. Why is it you want this, and what are you looking for, and how important is that? And don't push that goal too far out, because you don't want to sacrifice your 20s and your 30s and your 40s. I mean, the question Jimmy Carr, the comedian, once somebody asked him about money, and he had a really interesting line that I won't get it verbatim, but he said, assume everything you do works out and every bet you make works and you get paid more than you ever could imagine. And assume that happens for 25 years. And if I asked you 25 years from now, you'll be in your 70s, would you give it all back to go back to being the age you are now? And the answer is yes. Mm. So again, you could accumulate all the money, but eventually to have youth. My dad used to say youth is wasted on the young. Like that you have all this energy and all this excitement, and like how much you'd love to have that later. So like this whole sacrificing everything in your 20s and 30s to hopefully have money in your 40s or 50s or 60s. That's the Die with Zero book. I'm referencing a lot of things here. I guess the reading list is getting very big for the people in here, but it's like live and enjoy it and know what you have it for, because there's just a lot of, if you're just doing it for the money, so down the road you might get to enjoy it, you're going to get lost, and you'll just find that you're on this money merry-go-round that you just time keeps slipping and slipping away, and ultimately you have a whole lot of money and no time. And I've met lots of really rich people who are really unhappy because.
So how do you do that? What are your suggestions for connecting to a higher purpose, connecting to your why? What do you tell people to do? If someone says, I'm on the treadmill or I'm a little bit advanced, I have a lot of money, but I don't really have a clear purpose or a clear why. How do you connect? What would you tell people to do to connect to that?
I tell them to take the wow factor because it's free, just to get some idea of what they're sacrificing for money and see how that resonates. And if reading that report is, if they're happy with what their life is going, great. If they're not, good. At least they have some context for what they want to change. I recently myself took the purpose factor. I think it's purposefactor.co. is a great one to figure out what your purpose is and how you'll find joy in what you do. Because eventually, if you just work for money and you don't feel good about what you're doing, how you're doing it, or who you're doing it for, eventually you'll become a little resentful, stressed, tired, overweight, unhappy, you know, all that stuff. So I think understanding what your purpose is, is one thing. There's all kinds of interesting exercises, write your own obituary. I mean, we don't need to get too morbid on the, like, what's the whole purpose of life? But I do think at the end of the day, if you had the money, what would you spend it on? Like, make sure you're doing some things that you actually like, or try it, right? That's the whole, I'm doing all this work and I'm busting my ass so I can buy a Rolex. Great, go buy it. So bust your ass and buy a used one and wear it around for 3 months and tell me how much better you feel. And then learn the lesson that, oh, there is no watch and there is no car and there is no piece of jewelry and is like that is really going to make my life any better. Right? Like just figure it out. Like, find a test something. Or I'm doing this because I want to travel. Great. Don't wait to travel till you're 70. Go on a trip and go start to travel and go work remotely from Thailand or from Dubai or from Finland, or like go do that. That was advice I gave my son. Like, go travel while you can. Like, you don't have a job, good. Go do remote stuff and go clean boats in Venice. Knock yourself
Nice.
like, go have a cool experience. And he did. And so, like, go test these things and actually see what, before you go sacrifice 10 to 20 years of your life for something down the road, give yourself a little taste on, do I actually like that? And try. And you might find out, I really like this. And maybe you find out you're going to work 3 months and then travel for a month and you're going to do that for the rest of your life. Like, if that works for you, cool. But this whole work for your ass off for 30 years so that you can travel when you're old and everything hurts and you can't even get up Machu Picchu, or you don't want to,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think some of this stuff is try some things and see what you actually like, before you sacrifice all of this. There's a lot of people living for tomorrow and sacrificing so much of today. And that's a tough one, right? It's just tough. Like, I can't tell you the number of people who are living in miserable situations and like, why don't you leave? Because I'm getting paid too much. What's the point of the money if your life sucks?
Well, where do you stand in the view of, I hear a lot of people will say purpose is somehow of being of service to other people. Where do you stand? Is that a big part of purpose in your world? Is it a side effect as far as being in service of other people? How do you think that falls into people's financial and life and money plans?
Zig Ziglar said, you can have everything you want in this world as long as you help other people get what they want. And that is, before I heard that, I was living that. So my thing was get to know people with problems, figure out what those problems are, and then solve them. And then solve the problems that caused the most pain for the people with the most money became this is how I can get paid really well, by removing other people's pain. And so I think for me, it's a huge part of my model of who is the client, what's the pain point, and can I remove it? And ultimately, if somebody has a pain point and they know they have the pain point, awesome. If they don't, then you have to sell them on two things. Why does this hurt if it doesn't hurt? And, like, it's easy to fix the broken leg when you can't walk on it, but to tell somebody they've got something they can't see, it's a little harder to convince them of the treatment. So for me, the idea of service of other people, yeah, I live to help other people. Otherwise I wouldn't be doing this, right? Like, you tell me what the purpose is, I'm like, good. Money is people want to think about money differently. My whole mantra is money differently, business differently, life differently. I mean, that's what I do in all my businesses, is how do you align money, business, and what you have, what you do, and what things mean to you, what your purpose is. I mean, that's my whole existence. So I think having a reason, living intentionally versus living blindly, that's the matrix. If you haven't seen it, like, now, I think for people who are tired of reading, if you want to watch a movie like The Matrix, the whole blue pill, red pill, and do you want to know the truth and the reality, or do you want to live just blissfully ignorant? And I never choose blissfully ignorant. So I think if you have some purpose behind things, then you have that human connection of, oh, I'm helping people. Who doesn't want to be if you're known to help people versus being known to hurt people, you get invited to more places a second time.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the sense of community, and you have, right? Like we connected on a phone call, and if we hadn't connected, you wouldn't have had me on the show.
Exactly.
And so either we're aligned or I BS'd you really well, right? Like like one of those two things happened. So yeah. So where do I stand on the whole? Do you have a purpose? Yeah, you may not be able to vocalize it in a really elegant and eloquent 8-word personal mission statement, but you could just say that I have certain things that I want out of life. I do have some values that I'm not going to sacrifice, and ultimately I'd like to help people. Like for me, it's my simple values. I live in Texas, so people tend to assume that I'm a conservative Christian because I live in Texas, and I'm actually more spiritual, not religious, and I'm not conservative. But when people come up and go, "Oh," it's like, well, I'm not really interested in talking about beliefs, but I'm happy to talk about values, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions. And my values are: you should be 100% responsible for your own actions, and everything you say or do, you take responsibility and don't blame anybody else. And I think you should help people who are less fortunate than you, or who can't take care of themselves. And generally, when I bring that up to people, they say, "I'll buy that." Okay, good. Then we have similar values, right? I'm responsible, take full responsibility for everything I say or do, directly and indirectly. And if somebody's worse off, I'm happy to try to help. And I generally find, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You generally find.
Well, I generally find that people are okay with that, or at least the ones, either they found me because deep down we knew that. If you want to get into spiritual stuff and the universe giving people who, I'm finding people because we have similar values already, or it disarms them from getting into conversations about beliefs. Because I don't really care who you voted for. I care more about the values. If you value the same things, then whatever. I don't need to get into, I don't really care who you voted for. It doesn't, I want to know who you are as a person. I don't want to know how you acted on a different day because of however you were manipulated by the press and whatever other beliefs. Just give me what kinds of things are our values aligned. And if we are, we can talk, or we can interact or work together. Or, I learned that from Canfield. He was great. The guy who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul. He was wonderful at just with some of that advice of, here's how you get away from disagreements about politics, or, just that's meant to create conflict so that it creates conversations online, which creates viewership, which creates ad revenue, which creates, like, you're being manipulated. So I just disarm it, or try to.
That is an awesome point to close on, and we have covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. When it comes to the successful money mindset, the roadmap, everything we've been talking about, whether it's reinforcing something you already said or touching on something you haven't talked about yet, if you were to tell people, look, you listened, you watched, you heard a lot of good stuff. If you want this to have the right kind of mindset and create the right roadmap, at least do this one thing. At least do this one thing. What would you tell people to do?
Going to seem somewhat selfish. I say take the wild factor, just so you have some idea of what your conscious or unconscious behaviors might be leaning you towards, so you know what you're sacrificing in life. You should have some idea what some of that happened. I would say that's one thing. And if I could steal a second piece of advice, I would say find a mentor, whether it's a virtual one online or it's a real person, someone who's living a life that's somewhat like what you would like to live. Find someone. And if you think it's hard to find people, it's not that hard to find people online, and ask them to mentor you. And you can also ask them, say, I'd like to offer to do something. Is there a project you need done? Can I do it for you for free? And if I do a good enough job, would you be willing to mentor me? Like, find a mentor. I had a kid do that for me for marketing. He ended up being my $1,000 a week marketing guy for 3 years. Like, because he did something for me for free that was probably worth $200 to me, and he ended up, getting about 160 grand out of it. So, yeah, I mean, I would say find a mentor. Just find somebody to give you some life advice, because life is, someone who's just been a little bit further that you can talk to.
That is awesome. And if people want to find you online, where's the best place or places to go?
ChrisJarvis.me is my personal site. Be the Giraffe TV is the YouTube channel where my books are free on audiobook, and there's a bunch of things there. So Be the Giraffe TV is YouTube. Be the Giraffe.tv is the TV show. Lots of free stuff there. So I think that's probably, for this audience, probably a good place to go to get some books, some interviews, like lots of people that you might want to mentor you there. I've interviewed some pretty cool people on the TV show. Happy to help.
This has been awesome, Chris. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Mark, thank you. Always fun. Anytime.
And scene.